The plaza outside the Korath Grand Arena buzzed with activity in the hours following the match. Vendors selling recordings of the unprecedented combat. Gamblers arguing about whether their bets should be honored. And journalists from dozens of species clamoring for interviews with anyone connected to the strange. Human challenger Jisoo ignored them all. She walked through the crowd with Gaul at her side. The massive Crothian drawing stares and whispered comments as they made their way toward the holding facility, where a crew waited. Still unaware that their captain had won their freedom, "I do not understand," Gaul said, his deep voice rumbling with confusion. "You gave up your ship for me. You sacrificed everything you came here to save. Why would you do such a thing?" "Because you needed someone to choose you," Jisoo replied simply. "Because no one should spend their life being used as a weapon. Because sometimes doing the right thing costs more than you can afford, and you have to do it anyway." Gaul fell silent, processing her words as they walked. Behind them, unseen but never far, Yoonha followed with her recording equipment, capturing everything for the audience that had grown to include hundreds of millions of beings across the galaxy. The Solari journalist had expected the story to end with the arena match. Another tale of human foolishness in the face of alien dangers. But instead, she found herself documenting something far more interesting. People were watching, not just watching, but responding. Her network had received thousands of messages in the hours since the match ended. Beings from species across the sector who had seen the humans' strange victory and wanted to know more. Wanted to help, wanted to be part of whatever was happening next, and those messages kept coming in the holding facility. Jisoo's crew rushed to embrace their captain the moment she entered. 12 humans who had spent days wondering if they would ever see freedom again. Their joy at survival mixed with confusion when they saw the massive alien walking behind her captain. Said her first officer, a tall man named Minjin, whose steady calm had kept the crew together during their captivity. "Who is your friend?" "This is Gaul," Jisoo replied. "He was going to kill me this morning. Now he is coming with us." The crew exchanged uncertain glances. "Coming with us where?" Minjin asked carefully. "The Velthari took our ship. We have no way off this station. The ship situation is complicated," Jisoo admitted. "I may have traded it to buy Gaul's contract." Silence fell over the group. "You traded our ship," someone said from the back of the crowd. "Our home, our livelihood, our entire operation." "Yes," Jisoo said, meeting each crew member's eyes in turn. "And if any of you want to leave, I understand. I made this choice without consulting you, and I will accept whatever consequences come from that." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Minjun stepped forward and placed his hand on her shoulder. "Captain," he said, "I have served with you for 6 years. In that time, you have never once made a decision that did not have a reason. So I am going to trust that you have a reason now, even if I do not understand it." One by one, the other crew members nodded their agreement. "Besides," Minjin added with a slight smile, "where else would we go?" Jisoo allowed herself a small smile in return. Outside the holding facility, Yoonha watched the reunion through her recording device and felt something shift in the galaxy, as if a weight had been moved that would set countless other things in motion. She was right. The first donations arrived within hours. Beings who had watched the arena broadcast began sending credits to addresses associated with the human crew. Small amounts at first. Individuals who had been moved by what they witnessed and wanted to contribute to whatever happened next. Then the amounts grew larger. A shipping company on the Outer Rim offered transport for the crew at no charge. A gesture of solidarity from one freighter operation to another. An act of kindness that cost them money but earned them loyalty across the sector. A coalition of minor species. Races that had long suffered under Velthari economic manipulation, publicly praised the humans' actions and announced They would be reviewing their trade agreements with the consortium, the Crothian government. Shamed by broadcasts showing one of their citizens enslaved and forced to kill for alien profit. Issued a formal condemnation of Veltari labor practices and withdrew from 3 major trade partnerships. What had begun as one human trying to save her crew had become something larger. A movement spreading across the stars. Beings who had never met Jisoo Park taking action because her strange victory had reminded them that there were alternatives to acceptance and submission. Skethrix learned of these developments in his offices at the consortium headquarters. His compound eyes scanning reports that grew worse with each passing hour, stock prices falling, trade agreements cancelled, investigations launched. How is this possible? He demanded of his advisors. We followed every law. We used every legal mechanism available. We did nothing wrong. The human did not fight us with laws, one advisor replied grimly. She fought us with something we cannot defend against. And what is that? An idea. The advisor pulled up holographic displays showing the broadcasts that had spread across the sector. Jisoo's question echoing through millions of homes and ships and stations. Return alive or shredded. She made the galaxy ask questions. The advisor continued. About how we treat those we consider property. About whether our legal structures serve justice or simply serve us. About what it means to fight and what it means to win. That is ridiculous, Skethrix snapped. Words cannot destroy a commercial empire. But even as he spoke, another report arrived showing that the consortium's primary lending institution had frozen their credit lines pending a review of their labor practices. Words could not destroy an empire, but they could start the fire that burned one down on a transport ship bound for human space. Jisoo sat with her crew and with Gaul and watched the stars pass by through a viewport, her reflection ghostly against the endless dark. What happens now? Gaul asked, sitting beside her with his massive frame somehow seeming smaller than before, less like a weapon and more like a being still learning to be something other than what he had been forced to become. Now we find a new ship, Jisoo replied. One large enough for all of us, one that can take us wherever we need to go. And where is that? Jisoo thought about the messages still pouring in, the offers of help and partnership and alliance, the opportunities that had emerged from what should have been her destruction. Everywhere, she said finally. There are Veltari operations across the sector, using the same tricks they used on us, trapping people in debts they did not agree to, taking their ships and their freedom and their families. Someone needs to stop them, and that someone is us, Gaul said. And it was not quite a question. That someone is whoever chooses to be, Jisoo replied. I just hope that includes you. Gaul was quiet for a long time, staring at the stars with eyes that had seen too much blood and too much pain. On Crothia, he said finally, there is an old saying, the strongest warrior is not the one who kills the most enemies, but the one who makes the most allies. I never understood it until today. He turned to look at her, and something in his eyes had changed. Something that looked almost like hope. You asked me in the arena if I wanted to return alive or shredded, he said. I think I finally understand what you meant. You were not asking about the body. You were asking about the soul. Jisoo nodded. The Veltari tried to shred everything you were, she said. But they failed. You are still here, still capable of choosing, still able to become someone other than what they made you. Because of you. Because of yourself, Jisoo corrected. I just reminded you that you had the option. Gaul turned back to the viewport and watched the stars. Then I choose to help you, he said. I choose to fight with words instead of claws. I choose to make allies instead of corpses. I choose to be the farmer who grew crystal fruit and loved his family. He paused. And I choose to help others make the same choice I did. Jisoo smiled behind them. Yuna finished her final report for the day and prepared to transmit it across 17 star systems. knowing that billions of beings would see it, that her words would carry the story of a human who had entered an arena to fight and had instead started a revolution. The story was not over. It was barely beginning. But somewhere in the galaxy, Skethric sat in his darkening office and finally understood the answer to the question that had started everything. The human had never intended to shred her opponent. She had intended to shred the Veltari, economically and politically and socially, using weapons they could not counter and strategies they could not comprehend. Some species fought with claws. Some fought with technology. Humans fought with something far more dangerous. They saw someone in chains and felt an ice itch they could not ignore, and when they scratched that itch, empires fell. The arena adjudicator's chambers were cold and silent, a stark contrast to the chaos that still raged in the stands above, where security forces struggled to contain crowds that had witnessed something unprecedented and could not decide if they were outraged or amazed. The chamber itself was ancient, carved from the same stone that formed the arena's foundations. Its walls lined with holographic displays showing legal precedents dating back thousands of years. A repository of every ruling ever made in this place of blood and spectacle. In the center of the room stood a synthetic being of unknowable age, its body a framework of crystalline structures and flowing energy patterns, its mind a construct of pure logic designed by its long-dead creators to render absolute and unbiased judgment. This was Nexus, the adjudicator, and it had presided over arena disputes since before most current civilizations had discovered fire. Before it stood two parties locked in bitter conflict. Skethrix represented the Veltari Consortium, his mantis-like body quivering with barely contained fury. His advisors clustered behind him with datapads, filled with legal arguments and precedents and formal protests. Jisoo stood alone, her clothing stained with sand and sweat, her body unmarked by any wound from the combat that had just ended. Her expression calm in a way that seemed to infuriate the Veltari even more. This human made a mockery of our sacred traditions, Skethrix declared, his translator struggling to keep up with the speed and intensity of his clicks and whistles. She refused to fight properly. She corrupted our champion through psychological manipulation. She violated every principle of arena combat while technically following the letter of the rules. And yet I won. Jisoo said quietly. You won nothing. Skethrix snapped. You cheated. You twisted the purpose of the arena to serve your own ends. You caused irreparable damage to Veltari property and must be held accountable. The adjudicator's crystalline form pulsed with soft light as it processed the arguments. Specify the violations, it said, its voice resonating through the chamber without any apparent source. Skethrix gestured to one of his advisors, who stepped forward with a datapad. First, the human refused to engage in offensive combat, despite being provided with standard weapons and equipment. This constitutes a refusal to participate in good faith. Objection, Jisoo said. The rules specify that challengers must remain within the arena bounds, must not surrender, and must not die. Nothing in the regulations requires offensive action. The adjudicator's light pulsed again. The human's interpretation is legally accurate. Continue. Skethrix's compound eyes narrowed with frustration. Second, the human engaged in psychological manipulation of our gladiator, speaking to him during combat in ways designed to break his conditioning and damage his effectiveness. This constitutes sabotage of consortium property. I talked to him, Jisoo replied, her voice steady. I asked him about his home and his family and his life before slavery. If speaking the truth constitutes sabotage, then perhaps you should examine what truths you are trying to hide. You caused him to surrender, Skethrix accused. You robbed us of our champion through words that should never have been permitted on the arena floor. Your champion surrendered of his own free will, Jisoo said. I did not force him. I did not threaten him. I simply reminded him that he had a choice. If that reminder was enough to end his career as your weapon, then perhaps he was never truly yours to begin with. The chamber fell silent as the adjudicator processed the arguments, its crystalline structure flickering with calculations that span thousands of legal precedents and millions of possible interpretations. This tribunal must determine whether speaking to an opponent during combat constitutes a violation of arena regulations, it announced finally. There is no precedent for such a ruling, as no challenger has ever attempted such a strategy before, because it is obviously wrong, Skethrix insisted. Because it violates the spirit of combat, even if it follows the letter of the rules. The spirit of combat, the adjudicator replied, is not a legally definable concept. This tribunal can only rule on specific violations of specific regulations. It turned its attention to Jisoo. Human, do you maintain that you did not surrender, did not leave the arena bounds, and did not refuse combat? I do, Jisoo confirmed. I evaded every attack. I remained in the arena until my opponent surrendered. I engaged in combat using the only weapons I had available, my voice and my words. You call words weapons, Skethrix scoffed. Are they not? Jisoo asked. And something in her tone made several beings in the chamber shift uncomfortably. Words started wars and ended empires. Words built civilizations and tore them down. Words convinced Gaul to kill for you for years, and words convinced him to stop. If words are not weapons, then you have nothing to fear from what I said. The adjudicator's light pulsed one final time. This tribunal rules in favor of the challenger, it announced. And Skethrix's howl of protest filled the chamber. The combat ended with the surrender of the consortium's champion. Therefore, the terms of the challenge are satisfied. The human crew will be released and the human vessel will be returned. This is outrageous, Skethrix shrieked. We demand compensation for the damage to our gladiator. The gladiator was not physically damaged, the adjudicator replied. Any psychological changes resulting from the combat are considered acceptable consequences of arena participation. However, it paused. And something in that pause made Jisoo tense. For the first time since she had entered the chamber, the consortium may seek civil remedies for the depreciation of their property value through standard commercial courts. This falls outside the jurisdiction of arena law. Skethrix calmed slightly, his compound eyes gleaming with renewed calculation. We will seek the full value of our champion, he declared. 37 victories worth of earnings. Future revenue projections, training costs, maintenance expenses. The human cannot possibly pay such a sum. Jisoo had expected this. I would like to make an offer, she said. And both the adjudicator and Skethrix turned to her with varying degrees of surprise. I will purchase Gaul's contract myself, she continued, using my ship as collateral. The chamber went very quiet. You would give up the vessel you came here to save? The adjudicator asked, and for a synthetic being of pure logic, it sounded almost curious. Gaul deserves his freedom, Jisoo replied. He has earned it 100 times over. And the Velthari have no intention of ever giving it to him, at least with me as his contract holder. He would have a chance. Skethrix's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. We accept, he said quickly. Far too quickly, and Jisoo knew that he believed he had won after all. The human ship and cargo for the gladiator's contract. The consortium finds this an acceptable resolution. He turned to his advisors with barely concealed satisfaction. We came here to take her ship and crew, he said in a whisper that the chamber's acoustics carried to every ear. Now we take her ship and give her a broken gladiator in exchange. Sometimes the humans defeat themselves. In the press gallery above, Yunha, the Solari journalist, recorded everything. Her golden eyes bright with excitement as she documented the conclusion of the strangest arena match in living memory. She had been broadcasting the entire dispute live to her network, and the viewer counts had exceeded anything she had ever seen. Beings across 17 star systems hanging on every word as the small human fought and won, and then gave up her victory for a slave she had only met hours ago. What is she doing? Yunho whispered to her recording device. What is her plan? Because there had to be a plan. No one walked into the Korath Grand Arena and changed everything by accident. No one defeated the Velthari Consortium through kindness alone. The human was planning something. And Yunha intended to find out what, as security forces escorted Jisoo from the adjudicator's chambers. The journalist made a decision that would change her own life forever. She would follow this story wherever it led. She would document whatever the human did next, and she would make sure the entire galaxy was watching. The arena floor was stained with the blood of centuries. Dark patches visible beneath the fresh sand that the cleaning crew spread before each match. A reminder that this ground had swallowed the lives of countless beings who had come here hoping to survive. Jisoo walked through the gate and felt the roar of the crowd wash over her like a physical force. Tens of thousands of alien beings screaming for violence, their voices blending into a single hungry sound that vibrated through her bones. She was small here. The arena stretched around her like a bowl of stone and metal, the seats rising in endless tiers toward a sky filled with broadcast drones that captured every moment for an audience spanning 17 star systems. She was fragile here. Her body was soft compared to the armored creatures who normally fought in this place. Her muscles weak compared to the engineered gladiators who had made their names in this sand. Her weapons non-existent since she had declined the standard combat equipment offered to all challengers. She was alone here, and yet she walked to the center of the arena floor with steady steps and calm breath, her dark eyes scanning the crowd without fear. Her hands loose at her sides, as if she had come to this place for a morning stroll rather than a death match. Across the arena, a gate opened with a grinding shriek of metal, and Gal of Crothia emerged into the light. The crowd erupted with renewed fury at the sight of their champion, chanting his name in a dozen languages, while displays showed his statistics, his kill count. His reputation as the most feared gladiator in the sector Gal was magnificent in his terrible way. 3 meters of scaled muscle and contained rage. His body marked with scars that told the story of 37 victories. His eyes fixed on the small human who waited for him with impossible calm. He carried weapons. Of course, curved blades attached to his forearms that could slice through steel. But everyone knew that Gal rarely needed them. His claws and teeth had ended most of his opponents before the blades ever tasted blood. The arena master's voice boomed through amplification systems, reciting the formal rules of combat, the terms of victory, the conditions under which the match would end. And then the horn sounded and Jisoo was alone with a monster Gal charged. He covered the distance between them in seconds, moving faster than anything that large should be able to move, his feet pounding the sand like thunder as he closed on his prey. Jisoo did not run. She waited until he was nearly upon her, and then she moved. Not forward, not backward, but sideways, flowing around his charge like water around a stone, her body twisting in ways that made the crowd gasp with surprise. Gal spun and struck again, claws slashing through empty air as Jisoo ducked beneath his swing and rolled away, coming up several meters distant with sand in her hair and not a scratch on her body. The crowd muttered with confusion. This was not how arena combat worked. Challengers were supposed to fight, to struggle, to provide entertainment as they were slowly torn apart, not dance around the arena like leaves in the wind. Gal attacked again and again, each strike powerful enough to tear through armor, each swing accompanied by a grunt of effort and frustration. But Jisoo was never where his claws expected her to be. She did not strike back. She did not draw blood. She simply moved. Always moving, her body flowing through patterns that the security AI still could not classify, avoiding death by margins so thin that the crowd held its collective breath. And between the strikes, between the moments of desperate survival, she talked. "Tell me about the crystal fruit," she said, dancing away from a blow that would have removed her head. "What did it taste like?" Gaul roared and lunged, and she twisted beneath his arm and rolled between his legs and came up behind him before he could turn. "Was it sweet?" she continued, as if they were having a conversation over tea. "Or did it have that sharp taste that makes your mouth water?" "Shut up," Gaul snarled, spinning with claws extended. "Fight me properly. Die with honor." "I am fighting," Jisoo replied, weaving through another barrage of strikes. "I am just choosing not to hurt you." The crowd was growing restless, confused by this strange combat that looked nothing like the slaughter they had been promised. And Skethrix, the Velthari representative, rose from his seat to shout at the arena master. "Make her fight," he demanded. "This is a mockery of our traditions. She must attack or forfeit." But the arena master consulted his rules and found nothing that required a challenger to fight offensively, nothing that demanded she draw blood. Only that she remain in the arena and not surrender. Jisoo was following every rule while breaking every expectation on the arena floor. Gaul was beginning to slow, not from exhaustion but from confusion, his attacks coming less frequently as he struggled to understand what was happening. "Why you not fight?" he demanded, standing in the center of the arena while Jisoo circled him at a safe distance. "Why do you not try to kill me? Do you think you are too good to bloody your hands?" "I think you have had enough blood on your hands," Jisoo replied, and something in her voice made him pause. "I think you have killed enough, not because you wanted to, but because they told you that you had no choice." "I have no choice," Gaul growled, but his voice cracked on the words. "My family depends on me. Every victory brings me closer to buying their freedom." "How close?" Jisoo asked her softly. "After 37 kills. How close are you to the price they set?" Gaul went very still. "They keep raising it," he admitted, the words torn from somewhere deep. "Every time I get close, they add new fees, new charges, new debts that I never agreed to. It never ends." "It was never going to end," Jisoo said, and there was no cruelty in her voice, only compassion. "They do not want to lose their champion. They do not want to give up the money you make them. You were never going to buy your family back, Gaul, because they were never going to let you." The arena had gone quiet, the crowd straining to hear the conversation that the amplification systems were carrying to every seat. Every broadcast drone, every being watching across 17 star systems. "You are lying," Gaul said, but there was no conviction in his voice. "They promised me. They gave me their word." "They gave me their word too," Jisoo replied. "They told me I owed them 200,000 credits for fees I never agreed to and debts I never incurred. They took my ship and my crew and told me the only way to get them back was to die in this arena." She stopped moving and faced him directly, making no attempt to defend herself. "We are the same. Gaul, we are both victims of the same predators. They use the law like a weapon, and they use the arena like a slaughterhouse, and they laugh while we destroy each other for their profit." Gaul stared at her, his massive chest heaving, his claws trembling at his sides. "If what you say is true," he said slowly, "then I have killed 37 innocent beings for nothing. You killed them because you believed you had no choice," Jisoo said. "But you have a choice now, right now in this moment. You can choose to be the weapon they made you, or you can choose to be the farmer who grew crystal fruit and loved his family and wanted nothing more than to live in peace." She spread her arms, leaving herself completely defenseless. "Kill me if that is who you are," she said. "But I do not believe it is. I believe you are still in there, underneath all the blood and the pain and the lies they told you. I believe the farmer is still alive. Gal raised his claws, muscles tensing for the killing blow. And the crowd leaned forward in anticipation for a long moment. Nothing moved. Then Gal's arms fell to his sides, and he dropped to his knees. And the sound he made was not a roar of triumph, but a sob of grief for all the lives he had taken and all the lies he had believed. His weapon clattered against the sand. "I surrender," he said, his voice carrying through the silent arena. "I am done killing," and the arena exploded into chaos. The holding cells beneath the Korath Grand Arena smelled of fear and old blood and the chemical cleaners that failed to mask either scent. A reminder to every challenger that countless beings had spent their final hours in these same cold rooms. Jisoo sat on the metal bench that served as her bed and ate the nutrient paste that served as her meal and tried not to think about the 12 crew members locked in cells somewhere above her, waiting to learn if their captain could do the impossible. The guards had given her standard accommodations, which meant a space barely large enough to stretch her arms and a sanitation unit that required contortion to use in a single light panel that buzzed with an irritating frequency clearly designed to prevent sleep. She had 6 hours until her match against Gal of Crothia. Most challengers spent this time making peace with whatever gods they worshipped, or recording final messages for loved ones, or simply sitting in terrified silence as death approached with patient inevitability. Jisoo spent her first hour doing push-ups and sit-ups and stretches that kept her body warm and her mind focused. Exercises she had performed every day since her father had first taught them to her when she was barely tall enough to reach his knee. Her father had been a soldier once, before the first contact and the chaos that followed, and he had raised his daughter with the understanding that the universe was dangerous, but that danger could be prepared for and overcome. Fear is a message he had told her when she was young and scared of the dark. It tells you to pay attention, but it does not get to tell you what to do. She finished her exercises and drank the water they had provided, and then did something that made the arena security system flag her file for review. She asked to visit her opponent. The request worked its way up the administrative chain for nearly an hour, passing through confused guards and baffled supervisors, and finally reaching the office of the arena master himself, a withered Deshan named Vorn, who had managed the facility for 60 standard years. Vorn had seen many strange things in his time, but he had never seen a challenger request a social visit with the being scheduled to kill them. "Let her go," he ordered, curious despite himself, and added viewing permissions to his personal feed so he could watch whatever happened. Next, 2 guards escorted Jisoo through winding corridors that descended deeper into the arena complex, past cells holding creatures that snarled and screamed and threw themselves against reinforced barriers, until they reached a section marked with symbols that translated to something like extreme hazard. Gal's cell was larger than hers, but only because Gal was larger than her, and even so, the massive Crothian barely had room to move. His scaled body pressed against walls, covered in claw marks that spoke of years of captivity. He looked up as she approached, his yellow eyes narrowing with confusion that quickly shifted to suspicion. "You are the human," he said, his voice a deep rumble that vibrated through the floor. "The one who asked the strange question." Jisoo nodded and sat down cross-legged in front of his cell, ignoring the guards who positioned themselves nervously behind her with weapons drawn. "I wanted to meet you before tomorrow," she said. "I wanted to know who you are." Gal stared at her for a long moment, muscles tensing as if he expected some trick or trap, and then he laughed, a harsh and bitter sound that held no humor. "Who I am is a dead thing walking," he said. "A weapon that breathes, a tool that kills. I am whatever the Velthari need me to be. Nothing more." "That is what you do," Jisoo replied, her voice gentle. I asked who you are. The question seemed to confuse him more than anger, his massive brow furrowing as he processed words that clearly had not been spoken to him in a very long time. I was a farmer, he said finally, the words coming slowly as if dragged from some deep and forgotten place. On Crothia, before the Velthory came. I grew crystal fruit in the northern valleys and sold them at market and came home every night to my mate and our 3 younglings. Jisoo listened without interrupting, her dark eyes steady on his face. Then the trade agreements changed, Gal continued, his voice growing harder. The Velthory said our world owed them debts we had never agreed to. They said we had to pay or suffer the consequences. And when we could not pay, they came with ships and soldiers and took everything we had. His claws scraped against the floor, leaving deep gouges in the metal. They took my farm and sold it to off-world investors. They took my mate and sent her to labor camps in the outer systems. They took my younglings and scattered them across the sector as servants and workers and worse. And they took you, Jisoo said softly. They took me and put me in this cell and told me that if I killed enough beings in their arena, then someday I might earn enough to buy my family back. So I killed and killed and killed. And every night I dream of crystal fruit and the sound of my younglings laughing. He looked at her with eyes that held both rage and despair. Why do you ask these things? Human, why do you care about the being who will tear you apart tomorrow? What game are you playing? No game, Jisoo replied. I simply wanted you to remember that you were someone before you became something. I wanted you to remember Crothia. Gal went very still, his massive chest barely moving as he processed her words. You will die tomorrow, he said. But his voice had lost some of its certainty. I cannot show you mercy. My family depends on my victories. I have no choice. There is always a choice, Jisoo said, rising to her feet. Maybe not a good one. Maybe not an easy one, but always a choice. She turned to leave, then paused and looked back over her shoulder. I am sorry about your family. Gal, I am sorry about what they took from you. But they took your farm and your mate and your children. Do not let them also take who you are. She walked away without waiting for a response, leaving Gal alone with memories he had tried to bury and questions he had no answers for. Above in the observation galleries, word of the strange visit spread through the arena complex like fire through dry grass, reaching the ears of gamblers and merchants and nobles who had come to watch the human die. The odds against Jisoo climbed even higher as beings laughed at her foolishness and wagered fortunes on how quickly Gal would destroy her. But a few observers remained quiet, watching the strange human through camera feeds. As she returned to her cell and resumed her exercises and patterns that the arena's AI security system could not classify, she was not practicing combat moves. She was not training to fight. She was dancing. The movements flowed like water, smooth and continuous and utterly unlike any martial form in the system's database. And the AI flagged her file again, this time with a note suggesting that the human might be mentally unstable in the press gallery. Yoonha, the Solari journalist, watched the same footage and saw something different. She saw someone who was perfectly calm, someone who knew exactly what she was doing, someone who had a plan that did not involve fighting at all. Yoonha began composing her second report, her fingers moving with growing excitement as she documented what might be the strangest challenge match in arena history. What are you doing? Human, she whispered to her screen. What are you planning? Somewhere in the holding cells, Gal sat in darkness and remembered crystal fruit and his children's laughter. And for the first time in years, he thought about something other than killing. He thought about choices. The Korath Grand Arena rose from the dusty plains of Nexus 7 like a monument to violence and greed, its curved walls stretching toward the orange sky while thousands of beings from across the galaxy filled its seats. Hungry for blood and spectacle, Jizu Park stood at the entrance gate and felt the weight of 17 star systems watching her through broadcast drones that hummed overhead like mechanical insects, their lenses capturing every breath she took, every slight movement of her hands. She was not supposed to be here. 3 standard cycles ago, she had been captain of the cargo freighter Morning Star, running legitimate supply routes between human colonies and alien trade hubs, building a small but honest business with her crew of 12, people who trusted her with their lives and their futures. Then the Velthari Consortium had come calling the insectoid. Merchants had presented documents, claiming the Morning Star owed them 200,000 galactic credits for docking fees, fuel charges, and administrative costs that Jisu had never agreed to and certainly had never incurred. But Nexus 7 operated under its own laws, and those laws favored whoever had the most expensive lawyers. Her crew sat in holding cells beneath the arena, waiting to be sold as indentured workers to pay the fabricated debt. And Jisu had exhausted every legal option except one. Arena Combat. The Nexus Compact allowed any party in a dispute to demand resolution through the ancient rite of champion warfare, a tradition dating back thousands of years to when the arena's builders had decided that watching people die was more entertaining than watching lawyers argue. Jisu had volunteered herself as champion before anyone could stop her. The crowd noise swelled as she walked through the tunnel toward the central platform where the Velthari representative waited, surrounded by guards and advisors and holographic displays showing her vital signs to the eager spectators. Skethric stood nearly 3 meters tall, his mantis-like body covered in chitinous plates that gleamed under the arena lights, his compound eyes reflecting Jis's image 1,000 times over as she approached. "The human actually came," Skethric said, his translator converting clicks and whistles into words that dripped with amusement. "I expected your species to run when faced with real consequences." Jisu stopped at the designated spot and looked up at the towering insectoid without flinching, her expression calm in a way that made several nearby aliens shift uncomfortably. "I am here to invoke the rite of combat," she said, her voice carrying across the arena through amplification systems, "for the release of my crew and the return of my ship." The crowd rumbled with excitement, tentacles and claws and appendages waving in anticipation of the violence to come. Skethrix made a sound that his translator rendered as laughter, a harsh and clicking thing that echoed off the arena walls. "You have spirit, human. I will grant you that much. But spirit alone will not save you from what comes next." He gestured toward a massive display screen that flickered to life, showing images of creatures that made Jisu's stomach tighten despite her determination to show no fear. According to Nexus tradition, the challenged party selects the opponent, Skethrix announced to the crowd, clearly enjoying his moment of theater. "And I have prepared quite a selection for our brave little human." The screen cycled through images of gladiators, each more terrifying than the last, beings bred and trained for nothing but killing. Veterans of hundreds of arena battles who had painted the sand with the blood of countless challengers. "Choose your death wisely," Skethrix said, turning back to Jisu with what passed for a smile on his insectoid face. Jisu studied the images for a long moment, her dark eyes moving from one monster to the next. And then she did something that no challenger had ever done in the recorded history of the Koreth Grand Arena. She asked a question. "Before I choose," she said, her voice steady and clear, "I need to know something about each of them." Skethrix tilted his head, antenna twitching with confusion. "What could you possibly need to know, human? They are killers. That is all that matters. I need to know the terms of engagement," Jisu continued, ignoring the murmur of confusion spreading through the crowd. "Specifically, I need to know for each opponent, do they return alive? Or do they return shredded? Silence hit the arena. The broadcast drone zoomed in on Jisoo's face as beings across 17 star systems leaned forward, trying to understand what they had just heard. No one asked about the opponent. No one cared whether the gladiator survived. The entire purpose of arena combat was to destroy your enemy as brutally as possible, to prove dominance through violence and leave nothing but a corpse for the cleaning crews. Yet this small human female stood before the most feared gladiators in the sector and asked about their well-being as if she were inquiring about the weather. Skethrix recovered first, his laughter now tinged with something that might have been uncertainty. You ask if they survive their matches, he said slowly, as if explaining something to a particularly dim child. Of course they survive. Human, they are champions. Undefeated killers who have never lost a single combat. Jisoo nodded as if this answer satisfied her. But her next words sent another wave of confusion through the arena. Good, she said simply. Then I want you to ask them the same question about me. The Valkyrie representative stared at her for a long moment, compound eyes unreadable, before turning to consult with his advisors in rapid clicks and whistles that the translator did not bother to convert in the stands. A young Solari journalist named Yunha adjusted her recording equipment and leaned forward with sudden interest, her golden eyes fixed on the human who had just done something impossible. She had made the arena uncertain. The Valkyrie finished their consultation, and Skethrix turned back to Jisoo with renewed confidence, clearly having decided that the human was simply mad and therefore easy prey. I have selected your opponent, he announced. And the crowd roared with anticipation as a new image filled the display screen. The creature shown was massive. Nearly 3 meters of scaled muscle and barely contained rage, with arms like tree trunks and claws that had torn through armor, plating as easily as paper. Gaul of Crothia, Skethrix declared. 37 kills, 0 defeats, the most feared gladiator in the sector. He will tear you apart so thoroughly that your crew will have nothing left to bury. The crowd exploded with cheers and howls and clicking approval, already imagining the slaughter to come. But Jisoo simply looked at the image of her opponent, studying the rage in his eyes, the scars covering his body, the way his muscles tensed even in a still photograph. And she saw something that no one else in the arena bothered to notice. She saw exhaustion, not physical exhaustion, but something deeper, something that lived in the eyes of beings who had been fighting for so long that they had forgotten why they started. Gaul of Crothia, she repeated softly and then louder for the crowd to hear. I accept. The arena erupted into chaos as bets were placed, and odds were calculated, and beings who had never seen a human before laughed at the stupidity of this small creature who had just signed her own death warrant. But in the press gallery, Yunha, the journalist, was already composing her first report, her fingers flying across her recording device as she documented something that her instincts told her was far more important than a simple arena match. The human had asked the wrong question, or perhaps, Yunha thought as she watched Jisoo being led away by arena guards. Perhaps the human had asked the only right question anyone had ever asked in this place of death and despair. Perhaps that question would change everything.